Rescue teams are searching for hundreds of people left stranded or feared missing, a day after a strong earthquake hit southwestern China. At least 66 people are now known to have died when the 6.8 magnitude quake struck Sichuan province. Millions of people in the region were already dealing with a COVID-related lockdown. The BBC's Azadeh Moshiri has this report.
This is what a 6.8 magnitude earthquake looks like. And this is what's left of the towns it hit in southwestern China's Sichuan province. Rescue teams have been deployed to find survivors. Some trapped under toppled buildings. Authorities say dozens have been killed and warned hundreds of people are still stranded or missing.
We'll continue to seize every minute and second to rescue the injured and check the disaster situation. Carry out rescue work in a scientific and efficient way so as to ensure the injured people are transferred and treated as quickly as possible.
For those still under a strict COVID lockdown, there was no escape from the buildings they've been confined to. And away from urban areas, landslides have destroyed roads and created several obstacles for rescue teams. It's made getting survivors to safety challenging. Teams have sometimes had to use makeshift bridges to carry people through. Police and relief teams have also set up tents and food supplies for anyone who's been displaced by the quake. Here a reporter asks whether the family in this tent has eaten anything. Yes, they say, some instant noodles. Meteorologists have now warned that they're expecting significant rain to follow, making rescue operations even more difficult.
Getting to survivors is difficult. A magnitude 6.8 earthquake shook southwestern China on Monday. Remote villages are among the worst affected. Heavy rains have also challenged rescue efforts, creating landslides and floods.
The firefighters helped us today. We had 6 people on the boat, one of whom is an old woman. When we got off, a firefighter put her on his back and carried her to safety. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to leave, as there were quite a few aftershocks.
Firemen and the army have been battling the tough terrain for days.
We evacuated over 30 people in 4 hours. It took us 20 minutes to get the boat from the wharf to the village every time. We evacuated 3 elderly people, the oldest being 90 years old. It's always challenging to get them out, so we use stretchers to carry them down from the village.
Rescue efforts continue in the more built-up areas too. People have been buried alive under the rubble for days. Weather warnings remain in place. The earthquake is the strongest to hit Sichuan province in years. Strict COVID lockdowns and daily testing rules are also hampering operations amid a resurgence of the virus. Rescuers must undergo daily testing, and no one from outside the province can enter. People have also been told to stay at home in the capital Chengdu, where aftershocks are still being felt.
Typhoon Hinnamnor has hit Busan in South Korea and is now moving to Japan. South Korean officials are assessing the damage after heavy rains and strong winds battered the south of the country. Flights have been cancelled and schools and businesses closed. Rob McBride reports from Busan.
All along this section of coastline around Busan, it's the port city, the second biggest city in South Korea. You see scenes like this, cleanup operation, assessing the damage from this devastating storm. This all happened the hours of darkness, Monday into Tuesday. Now, the actual typhoon made landfall west of here, and the way that these typhoons work with their swirling winds around the center, it means that we being east of where it made landfall, this part of the coastline got all of these winds whipping in from the open ocean, combined with a storm surge and also a high tide, and then this is the resulting damage that you see all around here. If I can just explain to you where we are, this is a promontory, so it's very well exposed. Because it's exposed, it has all these quite elaborate sea defenses in place. There are large restaurants here, coffee shops. It's where people come to get a picture of the view to the sea, look out to sea, and so on. And the people who've been running these restaurants and cafes, they knew this was going to be a bad storm. They actually brought in their own concrete blocks in front of their businesses here to give them extra protection. In a lot of cases, it simply wasn't enough. The seas just came in. In some cases, the seas actually pushed back these large concrete blocks actually into the facades, into the fronts of their...
This is what many villages in Sudan's southeastern Gadaref state look like. Days of torrential rains and the seasonal flooding of the Rahad River has submerged homes. Many have collapsed, leaving residents with nothing.
The water came and flooded us and took everything. We used to have many books, but all of them are gone. We lost our savings, food and furniture. We have nothing but to thank God.
More than 4,000 homes have been destroyed in 23 villages near Sudan's border with Ethiopia. Most have been cut off for nearly 3 weeks. Authorities in the western Galabat region have provided some assistance, but it's nowhere near enough, and they have broadened their appeal, describing the situation as catastrophic.
The Directorate of Health in the state of Gadaref provided medicines and blankets. Also, the State Emergency Committee provided what assistance it could. But it's not sufficient compared to the size of the disaster. We urgently appeal to all Sudanese people to help us, as well as international organizations.
Several people died when the Rahad River burst its banks, and hundreds are displaced. These families have found shelter in a school. It's only temporary, and although it's dry, it lacks basic necessities.
We are in a very difficult situation. Our children can barely survive here. We need tents, food, and water. We need medicine. Our children are suffering as we don't have anything.
Large swaths of agricultural land are waterlogged, and livestock have been swept away, raising concerns of an outbreak of disease and an environmental disaster. The Rahad River floods every year, but people here say this is the worst they've seen in 3 decades.
Residents in southeast Bengaluru are leaving as fast as they can. Downpours that began on Sunday have inundated their cars and sent water through their homes. Some say they have lost everything.
So I reside here in this layout in the ground floor. So Sunday the heavy rain started and water from the road it started entering our layout, and within a 1 hour span like the entire house was full with water.
The southern state of Karnataka has received its most rainfall in decades. Bengaluru is India's tech hub. Affected areas include the offices of startups, IT companies, and million-dollar homes. There is heavy traffic on the roads as hundreds of people are leaving.
All the tanks are full and they are overflowing. Some tanks have breached. And there is continuous rain. Even today it is raining. Every day it is raining. Therefore, Bangalore, there is a picture that entire Bangalore is in problem. Entire Bangalore is not in problem. Basically, 2 zones, that too particularly one zone, Madhepura zone, is in problem.
Authorities say they are still assessing the damage. While levels are receding, low-lying neighborhoods like this one remain submerged. The water on that road is more than a meter deep, and it comes from a nearby lake that has overflowed. It's led to a debate about urban planning in one of India's biggest cities. Rapid development, illegal construction, and encroachments have blocked the drainage system, exacerbating the impact of climate change.
It's terribly underinvested in terms of infrastructure. Stormwater drainage infrastructure is absolutely almost absent. So we're relying on old tank irrigation systems and what we call Rajkalaways, which were sort of drains linking one tank, which is an artificial lake, to the other tank. These systems were designed for ecosystems which were 300 years back, not urban ecosystems, but rural ecosystems.
The government says it will spend millions of dollars to drain the water and demolish illegal buildings. Rains are expected to continue for some time. And
the mudslide hit before dawn. And for the families asleep in these homes in eastern Uganda's Kasese district, there was nothing they could do.
We try to clear that mud to see if we can retrieve more bodies. They are saying those houses were overpopulated and only 2 people survived.
Most of those killed were women and children. Kasese, which lies near the Congolese border, is prone to deadly landslides this time of year, and forecasters had warned of unusually strong and destructive rains.
So as we continue receiving more abnormal or heavy rainfall in the area, it's likely that even the river might burst its banks. And so we're already conducting early warning to the members of the community who live around the same river and around the river banks.
After a long drought, the heavy rains have fallen since late July, triggering floods and mudslides across the country and leaving hundreds of people homeless. Uganda's government has previously blamed climate change, but these steep hillsides are also becoming more vulnerable to landslides because of deforestation, overpopulation or terracing for farming.
The damage is so great, and actually as people of Kasese, we are appealing to government of Uganda and well-wishers, the donors, to come to our rescue because our people have nowhere to stay now.
The rainy season is set to continue until December. Authorities are advising people living in mountainous regions to be vigilant or move to safer areas. This community, though, is preparing to bury the dead.
Floods have turned the edge of open fields in Sindh province into the shorelines of an inland sea. A staging point for rescue missions, shuttling people to safety. Those from Dadu district now wait and worry for the ones left behind. Village after village underwater, only the tops of trees and buildings visible. People who are still here are completely surrounded, living as castaways in their own homes.
There are still children here. The floods came and we couldn't get the children out. We weren't able to save anything. Now we're stuck here. Our houses have fallen down. We are suffering a lot. What should we do? The government must help us.
Food is running out and they are stranded, but refusing rescue. Where animals represent wealth, to leave them behind is to lose everything.
There are a lot of thieves here. If we leave the house, we will be robbed. If they steal the plates and dishes we eat from, then what will we do? We're in danger here, but if we go to another place, our lives will be in danger there as well. And there we'll have nothing to eat. We'll die of hunger, hungry here or hungry there.
At least here, they say, in whatever remains of their home, they still have their dignity. It is a decision that isn't taken lightly. They are aware of their circumstances. There are sick and injured among them, and they know more water, more rain is coming.
Standing here, it really feels like you're looking out at a sea, but those are floodwaters, and they have devastated the houses in this village. The destruction, the debris, it all really speaks for itself. Now, there were about 1,000 people living in this village before the floods, before the monsoons. Now there's only about 100, mostly men, the elderly, and a few children, and they're here to take care of what little property they have left.
As we leave, our boat gets stuck on the roof of a house. A man swims across to help push us out. The floods may have taken their lives and property, but not their need to take care of each other. When the UN Secretary General comes to town, it usually means things aren't going well, but they may get better. Antonio Gutierrez has made his position clear: climate change caused the floods in Pakistan, a disaster forced upon poor countries by rich ones. So it is time to settle the bill. The government and millions of people affected by floods hope his visit helps loosen Western purse strings. What is your message to the people who are anchored firmly in the worst part of this crisis?
My message is that the world has a responsibility to support them, that the world must help Pakistan at the present moment for Pakistan to be able to rescue all the people in those dramatic circumstances.
The UN delegation has heard first-hand accounts from survivors and rescue teams of tragedy, suffering, and growing desperation. The rains and the raging rivers may have stopped for now, but that does not mean that all the danger is gone. What the Pakistani government is trying to showcase here in this place where people have been seeking refuge, they want to illustrate to the UN Secretary General that despite the fact that much of the dramatic weather is over, there still remain, for the people that are living in or near the flood zones, there'll still remain immediate threats to their lives. Nowhere more so than in Sindh province, where earlier this week there was a forced breach of the country's largest freshwater lake. Settlements sacrificed to save cities. And remote villages is where people need the most help.
I think people are slow to react because the problem is so big that it seems unapproachable. And the first thing is to just take a first step and get your team here, get your boots on the ground.
Volunteers say the government must cut through red tape.
If these visas are not, the process is not sped up fast enough, then it's gonna end up with a lot of people left with no help or no support, no kind of relief, no kind of rehabilitation.
International aid is arriving, but it quickly becomes clear that it is still not enough. Medics tell us people are suffering from malaria, waterborne illnesses, serious infections that started as small wounds. They admit people need more help than they are able to give.
An emergency call and the start of a well-practiced drill. But these firefighters aren't packing their hoses. These days, they're more accustomed to a different threat. This is the snake wrangler, a former police officer, now head of the Reptile Rapid Response Team. Today, they're after a poultry poaching python, digesting its meal at the scene of the crime. We've got to be fast, he says. The trap won't work, it might get away. The 3-meter-long serpent tries to escape, but there's nowhere to hide. After a short struggle, it's bundled into a sack and taken away. Back at the station, they've got 2 rooms full of these slithery home invaders. Conditions are overcrowded, but at least they get fed. Emergency services across Bangkok are receiving 60,000 snake-related calls a year, twice as many as 5 years ago.
The reason why we found more snakes in houses is because the aggressive expansion of the city. They don't have a choice because their natural habitat isn't there anymore.
But there's one place in the heart of the city where they're welcome. They're coming out now with a king cobra, which is the largest venomous snake in the world and by extension one of the most dangerous. And this is one of the few places in the world where they milk them for their venom. This is the Red Cross Snake Farm, a regional hub for anti-venom production. They extract the poison as part of a show to educate the public. Although this center produces enough anti-venom for most of Southeast Asia, there are some parts of the world where supplies are desperately short.
In South Africa and in India, because they don't have the official anti-venom producer. And the big pharmaceutical company, they stop producing because they lack of profit.
Back at the station, the snake wrangler's practicing his skills, perfected over 19 years. But his advice is, don't try this at home. Tony Cheng, Al Jazeera, Bangkok.
In the Paris suburb of Sèvres, Fauzi is packing. For a decade, he ran a charity mainly for young people in the area, but he had to shut it because of government funding cuts. He says the closure is a huge loss for the neighbourhood because there are few activities, people are poor, and rising prices are making their lives harder.
If you only have one income at home, you just can't survive until the end of the month. You can't keep up because energy, fuel, food, everything's more expensive.
Fauzi was one of the leaders of France's Yellow Vests, a protest movement sparked by high fuel prices 4 years ago. He says it feels like nothing has changed, that costs keep increasing, and it's the poorest that suffer most.
Energy bills are going up, and I hear Emmanuel Macron say it's the end of abundance and we all need to make sacrifices. Well, I'm sorry, but we were in the streets back then because we were already making sacrifices.
Soaring energy prices are fueling inflation, but also discontent among people who are struggling financially, and not only in France, but across parts of Europe. And some say that unless things get better, the EU could face a winter of social unrest. A new report by the EU's Trade Union Confederation says most low-income workers in the bloc will have to spend more than a month's salary on energy bills this winter. This week, people demonstrated in the German cities of Berlin and Leipzig.
I'm protesting against rampant inflation, and I want excess profits to be taxed to help ordinary people.
EU governments are scrambling to wean the bloc off Russian energy and maintain political pressure on Moscow. But unless they succeed in shielding consumers from high bills, they could face a public backlash as frustration grows with spiralling costs.
European energy ministers have failed to agree on a plan to cap Russian gas prices at an emergency meeting in Brussels. The session aimed to consider how to shield households and businesses from soaring energy bills. But the stalemate has cast doubt on whether the proposal will go ahead. EU Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson says countries heavily reliant on Russian supplies fear they will be cut off altogether. President Vladimir Putin had earlier threatened to make Europe freeze this winter if a cap is agreed. Russian supplies currently make up only 9% of EU gas imports, down from 40% before its invasion of Ukraine. European Council President Charles Michel has tried to reassure members. He says, "We need to remain calm. We must not let ourselves be intimidated by threats from the Kremlin." And he goes on to say, "We need to diversify our energy sources and supply sources because we see that Russia is not a reliable actor." In the UK, however, the Prime Minister announced a cap on energy prices to protect consumers. Liz Truss says the average annual household bill for gas and electricity will be limited to £2,500. That's around $2,900.
And I can tell the House today that we will not be giving in to the Leader of the Opposition who calls for this to be funded through a windfall tax. That would undermine the national interest by discouraging the very investment we need to secure homegrown energy supplies.
President Putin's threat increases the likelihood of energy rationing in Europe this winter. Analysts say August was already the most expensive month on record for energy tariffs on the continent. Prices in Germany were more than 35% higher last month compared with the same month a year before. France recorded a smaller increase, with costs rising a little over 22%. And in Italy, the prices jumped nearly 45%. In Netherlands, the energy bills were a record 151% higher in August this year than in August 2021. Let's bring in our guest. Sandrine Dixon de Clerve is an energy climate researcher and co-author of Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity. She joins us from Brussels. Clive Moffat is the founder of the UK Energy Security Group and a former UK government energy advisor. He joins us from London. And in Izmir in Turkey, we have Mehmet Agucu, who is the chairman of the London Energy Club and a former director of British Gas. A warm welcome to you all. I want to begin in London with Clive Moffat. Clive, what the British government is doing is capping energy prices at $2,900. That's obviously going to be a great help for the British people, and it's something that maybe other governments will take on as well. But the cost of this long term is said to be about $100 billion. Is this feasible?
To be honest with you, no. in the last month, government borrowings increased by over 30%. I think this is quite frankly, is this level of market intervention in the price is not justified. And I think it's there's other ways that could be achieved. There are problems with trying to, if you like, help households through the price mechanism, especially when you don't control wholesale prices. And I don't think price mechanisms should be used as a tool of welfare policy.
Mehmet, in Izmir, the governments have to do something. And this is the something that seems to be the easiest option, given that Russia isn't playing ball. Is this a good option, do you think?
Well, I mean, whatever EU decides, because we are going to hear about it from the EU president on Wednesday, despite all these disagreements witnessed yesterday, I think whatever matters is, at the end of the day, is to very quickly respond to the crisis. And in this regard, I don't see that there is much hope. We are talking a lot about possible solutions, from diversification of supply sources to tax on windfall profits, also reduction of consumption. But these are all medium to long-term measures. We need quick fixes if EU is not going to have a cold and very bad winter coming. And Russia seems to have an upper hand right now. They are providing only 9% of the EU gas, as opposed to 40% before the invasion of Iraq. And now, if you also have a price cap on Russian gas, it will totally be wiped out. Nothing will be there. And EU is not prepared to substitute for this loss. So I think it is very important to see the big picture. And I don't think that EU leaders are seeing the big picture. Of course, medium term, you can build a new European energy supply architecture through renewables, through diversification, through energy savings and efficiency, hydrogen, you name it. Perhaps revival of nuclear industry and new pipelines coming. But I think the key challenge to keep European households and industry happy and not to lose the competitiveness in the world markets is to fix the quick term. And most important challenge, I should tell you, is the market liquidity. Because if $1.2 trillion is not injected into power generators and households, I think we are going to see a sort of a Lehman Brothers collapse in energy industry very soon. So I think they have to act very, very quickly rather than dealing with nitty-gritty of this problem.
Well, let's bring in Sandrine here. Sandrine is an energy climate researcher. Surely, our guest is saying we need a quick fix solution, but surely quick fix solutions are what has got us into this problem in the first place. We need a longer term solution on energy reliance from one large provider like Russia. That needs to change, surely.
I'd like to build on that, and you're absolutely right. I do agree that we need short-term levers, and those short-term levers, however, cannot actually make us backtrack on our long-term objectives. As was just said, it's going to be difficult in the next few months, and we have to think through what are the buffers that we're going to give, the price caps, ensuring actually that we also work with consumers through energy efficiency measures and that we reduce our demand. I think it's a good thing that we've shifted from 40% to 9% in terms of our dependency on Putin. I do think that we need to be very careful that we don't set up further unholy alliances and substitute our dependency on Russia with other dependencies outside of Europe. So we do need to address the dysfunctionality of our current relationships geopolitically with regard to energy, but also very much address the infrastructure at the European level and the market signals that we're seeing. Also, the decoupling of the market from gas prices. This has been one of the key issues that we have seen and we need to start to address.